This is Chuck Sachs for Indie Opera Podcast, and I'll be talking with Jacob Ashworth, Artistic Director of the musical ensemble Cantata Profana, about their upcoming concert program, Lucretia, being presented at Here Art Center on May 23rd to 25th. Hello, Jacob. How are you today?
Good, Chuck. How are you?
I'm doing great. Now, I've read that this program, Lucretia, takes the form of a Baroque triptych.
Yes.
What exactly is that form?
Well, so what we start with is a bit of a take on the idea from sort of earlier Baroque operas where you introduce the deities at play at the beginning of the thing. So if you think of Ulisse or Orfeo of Monteverdi, where you'll have, La Musica comes out and speaks to you, or you'll have time and fortune and human suffering and love who will come out and give their they sort of present themselves and the impact that they might have on this story. And so with a story like the story of Lucretia, this is the classic Rape of Lucretia story, the characters at play are the deities, the sort of elements of the story are a little bit different. It's more like, you could think of it as sort of violence, vengeance, and justice, or something much stronger than that. So that will all be, it'll be in a very loose form of that, but there's sort of three pieces that introduce, and then we have these three larger sets, the last of which is Handel's solo cantata, La Lucrezia, which is an absolute, one of the greatest things he ever wrote. It's from his time when he was younger, back in Florence in 1706, when he was at his most experimental and just drama was over the top, and he went and busted out of the seams in every genre he was working in, but especially in solo cantatas.
Well, I'm excited because I don't know that piece at all. So, how much research time and effort did it take for you and Cantata Profana to create this type of programmatic concert?
That is a great question. It's a lot goes into it. A lot goes into it. So some of the pieces that are on this program are pieces that we've thought about for years, that have been waiting for their place in just the right program. And something like the main piece on the program, the Lucrezia, actually we performed that on its own a few years ago. And Hannah Collins, the cellist, and Annie Rosen, the singer, who have been with us since the beginning, they performed this piece years and years ago, back when they were in school together, and have been in love with it since, and have really brought that to us. So it's really their piece, and it's really their whole idea for this program in a lot of ways. And so once we started talking about, okay, how can we surround it with other things to really make it the centerpiece of something, it became pretty clear pretty quickly that it needed to be basically a social justice-y kind of program. This story is obviously very, very timely right now, but it's one of those rare cases of a setting of it that's hundreds of years old that actually still speaks to us in 2019 with the kind of anger and confusion and pain that we associate with it today, and the urgency that it has today. On the program, there's also going to be other versions from then. There's one duet that we're doing by Bellinzani, who is a composer that we had never really heard of. But you start looking up and you start doing research and you say, okay, well, who's written a Lucretia? And there's, if you get down into the weeds of that research, you find things, and then you look and it's like a number of people have written solo cantatas, a number of people have written different settings of them. None of them come close to the Handel in terms of a kind of language that we can hear today and think, yeah, that really resonates with us, with how we might feel about this story right now. So it was nice to pick one that's it's not like it's the most egregious, but it's definitely not very woke, and it takes Tarquinius and Lucretia and it paints them as this much more lovable Baroque duo, and it's sort of this love song of oh, but I love you so much, and why won't you have me? Oh, your love is too much for me, and it's just like unaware of the horror of the story. but with some fantastic music written underneath it, and a sort of very virtuosic Tarquinius aria, which our baritone Paul Max Tipton will do.
And there was a decision to leave Britain out.
Yeah, we decided to leave Britain out. It's hard to excerpt for a chamber concert, but we did think about it. We were considering using some of the in the Britain. There's these great female and male narrators, who tell the story. What we actually are going to use, though, is a bit of Respighi's Lucretia.
I didn't know that one either.
So we discover so many things. It's absolutely it's like Verismo 10 or 20 years later, so you can feel the modernism creeping in, but the style is still total Verismo, and it also has a narrator who's just la voce, just the voice, is what it's called, and he structures it's a one act, about hour-long opera, and he structures it in 3 moments, he calls them, these 3 scenes, and so this is the third moment, but we're actually using the narrator section from that, which Annie is going to do.
Okay. So what kind of instrumentation are you using throughout this concert?
It's a pretty wild instrumentation. Part of that is because one of the things that we're including and sort of sprinkling throughout this are a few very, very, very old numbers from the original version of what we know as Carmina Burana, or the Codex Buranus. Much before Karl Orff got his hands on it. But he did, amazing. He popularized it and did a ton of incredible research on it. But the original is this book that's a collection of 11th to 13th century songs, and they're sort of in 6 different categories. The songs of, I can't remember them all, songs of morality, songs of spring, songs of sort of blossoming good love, and then songs of much more painful bad love, and then there's also so there's social commentary that's happening, but the thread that runs through all of them for me is the sense of community, that these are songs that are absolutely open. We don't really know who would have played them or sung them, or what instrumentation. They can be done as solos, duos, with groups of voices, and with instruments. You can choose your own adventure all the way through it, but they all, to me at least, have this feeling of something that would be shared, and this kind of secular song in that time period was about community in a way, and it's not performance and artist and audience. It's much more about telling the story together, and so there's something so important here about telling stories and hearing especially women's stories, and the instrumentation for that is a bunch of medieval instruments that we have. We have some people that play those, so I'll be playing the vielle, which is an early violin. Our lute player Arash Nouri will be on an early kind of lute, and then we have Nina Stern, who is just one of the greatest. She plays about 1,000 instruments from every century, and she's a totally remarkable person, and so we're also bringing her in as sort of a heavy hitter for that, which is great because we get to learn from her a little bit. So that instrumentation will be there, and then the instrumentation for the Handel is just a continuo, which is just going to be cello, lute, and harpsichord, standard continuo group. But we also have some new music on the program, so there's piano, and then Arash, who's playing lute, will also pick up an acoustic guitar to do some Joan Baez, and there's a piece by Francois Sarhan, which is for open instrumentation and tape, and we'll be using a strange combination of everything for that. And so there's enough open instrumentation in this concert that we get to kind of combine all the centuries in the sound world when we want to, and play with that and shift that dial.
But that I feel, or I understand, that's kind of your pattern in a sense.
Generally. We like to do that a lot. Because
usually you have period instrument ensembles, you have modern instrument ensembles. Rarely do they cross over, and certainly not in the same program.
Yeah, we have. So we're really lucky. We have a lot of switch hitters in the show, and people who are not just dabblers but real specialists in early and contemporary and everything in between. We like to. It's sort of, we joke about it a bit, but It's like the goal is to become a specialist, but a specialist in everything. So that's the life goal. And it's kind of the life goal of the group, too, is to eventually really have... And whenever you have one person who is a particular specialist in it, they can teach the rest of the group so much that we learn from each other a ton. And then we get to sort of imbibe these different styles and try to live in them and make them come together.
Now, where did you go to university?
All of us met at the Yale School of Music.
Okay.
So that was in our graduate school there. So we were all there, and it was a great group that was there at the time, and then we sort of wanted to keep going. So.
And do you feel the training you received there prepared you for the creative work you're doing now?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I feel like...
Because I know Heartbeat, speaking to Ethan
Yeah.
and Louisa, they talked about the specific program they had in opera there that kind of developed their ideas and thoughts.
Well, definitely the early music component at Yale when we were there was the sort of thing that was available to you if you wanted to go out and grab it, and a bunch of us went out and were very greedy about taking as much as we could from that. So there were definitely opportunities, and I think the people that are in the group are the people that wanted to really do more and explore all these different things. So we found what we needed there. And I think also what it did is it did foster a place where it made sense to start projects together and try to do things. So it's not quite the same story as others where, there was a particular class in which we all met and there was something like that. But it was definitely in the environment there that it happened. So we're very grateful to have been there at the same time and been able to get in the sandbox all together.
So when did Cantata Profana then officially kind of come together after that?
Well, so I think like probably many groups, we did our first concert. Somehow I had the name already at that point. There were a bunch of people who helped in the first concert, but it was we didn't really know what it was yet, or at least I don't think it's like the origin story is totally lost in the sands of time. Even for me, I can't remember it because what I do remember is that we did a first concert and it was somehow packed to the gills. A thing that it took us a while to figure out how to replicate afterwards, and it was like it felt like a sort of a mandate afterwards. We sort of met the next morning and it was like, okay, well, we have to do this because everybody just says they haven't seen anything like this. And I don't think we realized when we were starting this that there was some particular void that was missing where I hadn't realized that nobody was doing vocal chamber music around us or that nobody was putting Baroque music and modern music together. We just did the thing that we wanted to do, and then you find out when everybody comes and sees it and tells you afterwards that they haven't gotten a chance to see that anywhere else. I think, oh, okay, well, then let's keep doing this.
So now, you recently completed a run as co-music director of La Susanna by Strudella, which was co-produced by Heartbeat Opera and Opera Lafayette at the Kennedy Center, D.C., and Bam Fisher, New York City. How do you feel that production went?
It was really terrific. That was a great collaboration and a great couple of venues to work in. It's very fun to go and pinch yourself walking into BAM every day when you're working there. But the show was terrific. The score, which Ryan Brown from Opera Lafayette brought to our attention, I just was falling more and more in love with it every day we worked on it. It should absolutely enter the canon. I mean, it's
I would agree. It's very emotional music.
Very dramatic, and he writes, and he does all kinds of great things that are fun to play with, like the way he'll do, sort of like Mozart does or Handel, like he'll give the bad guys some of the most beautiful music, and then you have to contend with that, and he'll give somebody else, he writes such specifically dramatic music that there's a lot to latch onto and do. And then the production that we did was really tackling this current moment. I mean, it's about two judges who try to imprison somebody based on false sexual assault accusations that they accuse her
they
of.
become judge and jury. And,
exactly. And we picked this piece before Brett Kavanaugh's hearings, but that was happening during our production meetings. I mean, everything that's been happening,
and it's also a good pairing with Lucretia.
Yes, yeah. So it feels very much like the work is continuing, as having worked intensely on both projects for me and some of the people involved. Paul Max Tipton, our baritone, was our first judge in Susanna. Arash Nouri, who's our lute player, was leading our continuo band for La Susanna. And for us, it's keeping the work going, which feels really great because it's the best kind of work to be doing when those things marry together, the politics and the actual art you want to be working on.
Now, the original oratory was set for all male voices. When and why was the decision made to switch 3 roles to female singers? And what work did the score require to affect those changes?
Originally it's for 5 voices, which is just, as you said, 5 men, which is a tenor and a baritone, tenor and a bass. And then the 3 upper voices would be, one of them would have been a countertenor, but the other 2 were castrati. And so no men are going to sing those these days anyway. So already, if you were to do a performance of Susanna today, you would automatically be using a woman to play Susanna, and you would be using a woman to play the role of Daniel as a pants role.
Okay.
So we left the decision of Susanna being a woman, and we decided that Daniel, instead of being a pants role, she would just play it as a woman. And then the bigger decision was, instead of a countertenor, to ask Sarah Kuden, who's an incredible contralto, to take on the role as a woman and be the female storyteller, because men wrote the music, wrote the story, tell the story. It's through that, and the male gaze is a big part of this show, and so having a female Testo, who's the narrator, who we called the scholar, she did it as her lecture, was just opened up the whole piece.
But it's also interesting because there became this kind of overthrow of the student of the scholar, because the scholar was doing a certain point, but she was still, in a sense, holding up the, original society's reigns and everything, without really breaking open and just like what we say, liberal guilt.
Yeah.
In a sense. And it took the student, when the student took over, it's like, and then we finally see the passing of the baton, in a sense, the pointer.
Well, this is, and you picked up on it beautifully, but we talked about this so much throughout the process, that the storyteller, the testo, is not, she's not free from some form of guilt herself. We talked about that, how culpable she is in telling this story. You're telling a story to explain what is problematic in this sexist story, but meanwhile you spend a lot of time on the problematic things without necessarily telling us right away that they're. One of the classic things is Susanna faints in the fountain and she's naked, and Testo spends a good 5 minutes telling us about how she's naked. But she's the one who's supposed to be condemning the judges for looking at her, but she's frozen the scene so that we can look at it for 5 minutes. And so, what is that? Exactly. And we talked about it too. I mean, with any kind of conversations around politics like this, waves of generations will further the work that's been done. And sometimes you look at whether it's any kind of civil rights, identity, feminism, anything like that. You'll constantly have somebody who looks at somebody else's work from 10 years ago and says, "Oh, that's a past way of looking at this. We have a new way of looking at it now." And we do have to keep passing that baton in order to make further progress.
I mean, we there's the whole conflict that came up between transgender and the issue with the word tranny
and RuPaul
and RuPaul, and also Lady Bunny and a lot of the original. Including the San Francisco, the ferries out there. I mean, and in a sense, you understand it, but at the same time, the younger generation is trying to control the older generation and their presence and their authority and their experience, and it's like we can't have space for both.
Yeah. Well, it's the new generation's progress has a lot of it results in a lot of destruction as it builds the next thing, and that it's very, very careful balance that we have to find in everything.
Yes, and it's excited that both Heartbeat and Cantata Profana is able to look at this kind of work that way.
It's a very exciting season to be part of doing this,
So-
and it's been great to talk to audiences afterwards and hear.
And what's up next?
For Cantata Profana?
Yes.
In next year, in September, we're going to be back at Joe's Pub, which we love to go to with our John Taylor Ward, our singer, who's done a number of shows there.
Taylor.
And so he and I and a few others will be putting together a concert at Joe's Pub. And then we do have a few things coming up, but I think I won't announce them quite yet, but they'll come out. But there's sort of a mini festival we're going to be doing at some point with a larger piece, and then a couple of collaborations. So,
and of course, the work with Heartbeat.
And with Heartbeat, yeah.
Which is the next one is Der Freischütz.
The next one is Der Freischütz. We'll have our drag show in October, and then Der Freischütz in December. And then in the spring of 2020, Ethan and I will be working on a version of Macbeth.
Wow.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you. I'm
Thank
excited
you so
to see
much.
the program.
Yeah, thank you for coming in and talking about it.